It is Sunday, the 23rd of October, 2016. I'm in front of the Lakeshore Unitarian Universalist congregation, engaged in my alternative spiritual practice of protesting against Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy, and specifically the misuse of Canada's blasphemy law to cover up pedophilia and rape. So these are the picket signs that I'm displaying. Unitarian Universalists misuse blasphemy law to cover up and deny pedophilia and rape. And I also have, okay, what do we got here? A guy coming along. Let's make sure he has an opportunity to see the signs, but of course he's not looking this way. Studiously avoiding seeing the signs. I also got this one. It's so windy today that I can't really have freestanding picket signs because they just get blown all over the place. So I just got my picket sign saying Unitarian Universalists misuse blasphemy law to cover up and deny pedophilia and rape. And the unsafe sect picket sign is just down at the side of the sidewalk there. So anyone who walks by can see it. I suppose I could actually pull out a couple of the other ones and just leave them lying flat now that I think about it. So let's do that. So a couple more are readable. And let's see here. Yeah, that's a good one. Unitarian Universalist perversion of justice sucks you asterisk you. And I think I got one saying yes, atheist use accuse me of blasphemy. That's a pretty good one, because it's really quite hilarious how the Unitarian Universalists that are accusing me of blasphemous libel to hide pedophilia and rape are atheist Unitarians. That's really quite amusing, to me anyway. I mean, it's not amusing that Unitarian Universalists would try to use blasphemy law to hide pedophilia and rape. Well, I mean, yes, the blasphemy law part is amusing. What they're misusing it for obviously isn't. But Unitarian Universalist perversion of justice sucks ass. You asterisk you, Mary Bennett. Unsafe sect. Classic from the old days. And atheist user accusing me of blasphemy. So yeah, we'll just leave these just lying flat near the entrance into the church. And we shall display the picket signs here. Anyhow, guess the guy's arriving a little on the late side because I think it's probably past 10:30 now. Do a little time check here. But yeah, it hasn't been a huge turnout from what I'm seeing. Okay, it's 10:34, so it's like, yeah, the service should have started about 5 minutes ago. I got here at around, I guess, it had to be around 9:30 or even a little earlier. And so, well, actually, no, I'm wrong. It was more like 10 o'clock now that I think about it. It was around 10. And so I basically here half an hour before the service started. Didn't see a whole lot of people going in. Could be that a fair number of people showed up more than half an hour early, which is not typical for Unitarian Universalists. But then this isn't a typical Unitarian Universalist church service. It's the Eastern gathering of the Canadian Unitarian Council. So it could be that people showed up and went in earlier, and I was a little late showing up for the protest, thanks to the transportation situation in Montreal, which isn't so good these days with construction and so on. Anyhow, I think I'll stay and wait until people leave. And the other option would be to go to the other Montreal Unitarian Church and catch the people leaving there. But I think no, I'll stick it out here because there's a better chance of non-Montreal Unitarian Universalists seeing the signs. I don't doubt that a certain number of them will be going to the Unitarian Church of Montreal as well. They'll be skipping this service and going to the Montreal one. People involved in the gathering of the Eastern region. But nonetheless, I think I will remain here until people start coming out. And I will then, I think, maybe go to the Unitarian Church of Montreal later, because I believe they're having a concert between 2 and 4, and I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, some of the people, you know, from the Eastern region gathering will go to that concert. And even if they don't, there's a good chance that non-Unitarian members of the public will be showing up for that concert. So it'd be good to bring it to their attention that Unitarian Universalists misuse blasphemy law, cover up and hide pedophilia and rape committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers, Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers, and you know, even ordinary Unitarian Universalist lay people. Because even though the Unitarian Universalist Association's legal letter spoke specifically of Unitarian Universalist ministers and did not reference anything beyond that, the fact of the matter is that one of the Unitarian Universalists that I had specifically described as a pedophile rapist, because that's exactly what he was at the time the only Unitarian Universalist who I had accused of pedophilia. Now, I did know of cases of pedophilia, child sex abuse committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers, but I hadn't actually blogged about them. You know, they weren't mentioned on the blog, and the only case that was mentioned on the blog was the case of one Richard Buell of First Parish Norwell, who was charged, tried, and convicted of the rape of a neighbor's daughter and also a female family member, who, according to the age differences and so on, would probably have been a granddaughter or grandniece or something. In any case, to the best of my knowledge, Richard Buell was not a Unitarian Universalist minister. He was a member of First Parish Norwell. He was a lay person. I don't doubt that he was fairly prominent within the church, based on what I've heard. He was, you know, one of the leading members of the church. But to the very best of my knowledge, he was not a Unitarian Universalist minister. So it was kind of strange that the Unitarian Universalist Association accused me of, you know, falsely accusing Unitarian Universalist ministers of specifically pedophilia when I hadn't actually at that point in time done so. So they were obviously referencing my blog posts about Richard Buell, who, as I said, to the very best of my knowledge, was not a Unitarian Universalist minister. Maybe there's something about Richard Buell, I don't know. But considering just how sloppy some of the other legal work was, it's probably just a stupid mistake on the part of Stikeman Elliott, Barristers and Solicitors Litigation Lawyer, Maitre Marc-André Coulombe. I mean, it wasn't the most stupid mistake. Probably the most stupid mistake was specifically accusing me of the criminal act of blasphemous libel for blogging about Unitarian Universalist pedophiles and rapists. That's a huge mistake on several different levels. But I think, one of the most interesting aspects of that mistake is that blasphemous libel is, blasphemy. It's blaspheming against a religious community. It's subjecting a religious community to, extremely offensive criticism, essentially, is what it comes down to. Canada's blasphemy law itself is incredibly vague. It really doesn't say much beyond, anyone who commits blasphemous libel can be sentenced to 2 years in jail. That's pretty much all it says. It does not define what blasphemous libel is in the law itself. You have to go to jurisprudence to, find out, well, what exactly is blasphemous libel. And when you do that, you discover that blasphemous libel is, as I said, it's essentially extremely offensive criticism of a religious community. It really has to be very, very offensive, and it's not even clear. The way the law, the jurisprudence is worded, it's not even clear if it has to be offensive only to the members of the religious group, or if it has to be offensive to society as a whole. That's one aspect that's unclear. But the clear thing is that you have to be very offensively attacking something, that is held to be sacred and holy by a certain religious community. So what this comes down to is that the only circumstance where I could possibly be guilty of the criminal act of blasphemous libel for blog posts that are critical of Unitarian Universalist pedophiles and rapists is if such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape were held to be sacred and holy by the Unitarian Universalist religious community. That's really the only way I could be blaspheming against the religious community for blog posts that are critical of such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by certain Unitarian Universalist ministers, such as Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell, such as the minister of a Indianapolis area Unitarian Universalist church who was sentenced to 8 years in jail for the sexual abuse of children some time ago, such as a certain number of other Unitarian Universalist ministers who were also sentenced to jail terms for sexual abuse of children. There's some publicly known cases of Unitarian Universalist ministers being charged, tried, and convicted of what the Unitarian Universalist Association's Canadian attorney, Maitre Marc-André Coulombe, describes as such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. So there's no question that some Unitarian Universalist ministers, a fairly small percentage, have been charged, tried, and convicted of such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape and have gone to jail. But then, of course, there's the fact that for every person who is charged, tried, and convicted of pedophilia and or rape, there are others who aren't convicted, aren't tried, aren't even charged. I am quite certain, in fact I know, that the Unitarian Universalist religious community does have other pedophile and rapist clergy within its ranks who were not charged, tried, and convicted. Who for whatever reason, may never have even faced criminal charges at all. That they did these things, but the victims never took it to the criminal justice system and so on. Although they may have, and some definitely did, complain to the church itself. So the church has received complaints from people about sexual abuse of children and so on, and we're talking about certain cases where the complaints were never reported to the police. In fact, the Unitarian Universalist Association or the local Unitarian Universalist churches, or a combination of both, in the case of the Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell rape case, did try to conceal his rape of teenage Tibetan refugees. They did try to ensure that it never got to the police. What happened is that while some Unitarian Universalists were trying to persuade Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell's victims to sign confidentiality agreements, which would have silenced them, some other members of Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell's congregation, I believe 5 women who had been told about the rapes by the victims themselves, if I remember correctly. As I understand it, one of the victims at least told these women what was happening, how she had been repeatedly raped by Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell. And these women, members of Reverend Mac Wallace Mitchell's congregation, decided that the best thing to do was to report what they'd been told to the police, and so they did.